Okay, well, welcome everyone to this edition of Human Wisdom Live. And we're going to be talking about a really important subject, which causes so much suffering in the world, which can be avoided. And if we can get our collective intelligence together to figure this out and share this with others, that's our aim with Human Wisdom, is to help reduce suffering and make the world a better place. My guest today is John O'Sullivan, who's an old friend and a fellow traveler with Human Wisdom, and we work together, and you'll find him on the Human Wisdom app with a number of our conversations. So John, welcome. John's a counselor and works in the north of England.
Thank you very much.
So yes. The plan for the next hour, we're going to keep this to an hour, is that John and I will speak for about between 30 and 40 minutes, and we'll go through a whole bunch of questions that we've prepared. And then we're going to open it up for your comments and your insights and thoughts. So please keep your questions and insights, and we'd love to hear from you and know what you see, what you think. So John, let's start with the first question.
Okay.
We're hurt, okay, and we're angry with people. What's the first thing we could do? Could we re-examine the hurt we're feeling, perhaps, when we're talking about the subject of forgiveness?
Yeah, is it a perceived hurt or is it a genuine hurt? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes. It may not be anything to do with the other person, for example.
Correct. Yeah.
For example, was the hurt intentional?
Yeah. Was it intentional or was it caused by perhaps an unmet expectation that you might have had on that relationship?
Well, I've known people who haven't spoken to each other for 10 years because somebody didn't invite them to dinner when they were visiting town. These were brothers, and so on. So people get hurt for all sorts of reasons, and maybe that feeling of being hurt comes from our own expectations, which we're not aware of, which come from our own conditioning.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our conditioning could be everything from religious, cultural, parents, even, society at large. Our conditioning can influence, again, how we react and how we think.
Yes.
In certain situations.
And when we get hurt, we feel vulnerable to communicate that hurt. So the other person may not even know that we've got hurt, but we just withdraw, and then we just carry on with our anger against others for years and years.
Yeah, exactly. And it's unspoken.
Yes.
And
I met a man the other day who's got 4 brothers who live just within an hour of him, and he doesn't speak to any of them because they've all fallen out for one reason or another because of some perceived hurt. So I think the first thing when we're talking about forgiveness is to ask ourselves, look, can I re-examine the hurt and anger I'm feeling? Could this be coming from me, from my own unmet expectation? It may have nothing to do with the other person. And if I do feel bad about something, can I communicate that rather than, and that could be the end of it there and then, immediately. Right?
Why do we not communicate that hurt? Why do we
not do that, John? Do we feel vulnerable, or do we worry about how the people are going to react?
I think that's one of the primary things, feeling vulnerable, we both know there's a number of other things here that drive that not communicating, but feeling vulnerable might be one of the primary things that's going on there.
Yes.
That you might be putting yourself out on the line.
Yes. And it's something we all need to learn. It's a paradox, but we need to learn how to be vulnerable if we want to have healthy relationships, right?
Exactly. And it's very difficult to be vulnerable when you feel that you may get hurt again.
Yes, yes, yes.
And you feel like you're laying yourself open to that hurt.
Yeah. I was visiting New York last week, and a couple of my friends who I messaged said, hey, are you busy? And they said, sorry, we're busy, we can't meet you. Now, I could easily get hurt, get angry, and so on. And I could then be blaming them for hurting me and then react by not speaking to them ever again. Do you see what I mean? See how easily
and
that's
all they're
done?
doing is just living their lives.
Yes.
At that moment in time.
Yes. So our own expectations create our own pain and our own reaction of anger and so on. So that's something to watch out for. That's the first question. Okay.
Yeah.
Second one is why does our mind keep these hurts alive in us? Like we forget. I forget what I ate last week. Or, but I'll remember what somebody said 10 years ago or 25 years ago. Why does our mind do that?
A number of things happen. We tend to, one of the biggest ones that I come across in this field is justified anger. That person did this to me, and, and they should pay for it. And I'm right to feel anger. I'm right to feel this pain and not forgive them and hold them to account.
There's something going on in our thinking. The human mind's the same, you see. Yeah. The world over, whether you're in Alaska or Argentina, doesn't matter. If you've been hurt, our mind keeps the memory of that hurt alive.
Yeah. For
generations sometimes, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And maybe one of the reasons is it's maybe because we feel justified, as you said, we feel superior to others, but it also becomes part of our identity, becomes part of the me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. And that superiority that you mentioned there, that's, we kind of get into that mind frame of, well, I'm a better person. I wouldn't do to somebody else what they did to me. I wouldn't be that way.
I'm different to them.
I'm better.
Yes.
Yeah. That's kind of the part of the payoff, and it's part of the maintaining factor for keeping that anger and that unforgiveness alive.
Yes. By the way, if anyone wants to comment on anything we're discussing, please add it to the chat and we'll refer to that when we finish talking and open it up to everyone. So this is something that the mind does automatically. So if we want to do something about it, we have to consciously intervene. Because if you don't do anything, your mind is going to remember those hurts. It's going to become part of your identity. You're going to feel like a victim. And this whole thing gets perpetuated. Yes. And you don't even, it's not even you, it's your mind. You see what I mean? The difference.
Your mind, yeah. You're not consciously doing it. You're not thinking, I'm going to consciously carry this pain forward.
Yes.
But we do.
Yes. And of course, the reaction and action and reaction continue, right? Classic is a relationship, something happened and someone reacts to that and someone reacts to that reaction and it sort of goes on. And of course, in the end, when things die and then all hell breaks loose, there's blood everywhere when people break up because people have just not moved on from all the different hurts they felt in that long relationship. Okay. So how does this, there are many causes of being hurt, which is why we need to forgive. Can you think of a couple of common ones?
A couple of common ones. Somebody leaving our lives that we weren't expecting to leave. Maybe he's feeling betrayed in some way or abandoned in some way.
Yes. Or criticized.
Or criticized, yeah. That's another big one, criticized, because the ego gets a little bit bruised when we...
Yes. So I know a family where the daughter-in-law refused the grandmother access to the grandchildren all their lives because of some criticism the mother-in-law, or maybe it was implied, I don't know, made against the daughter-in-law. You see?
Yeah.
So from this hurt, we react without realizing that's what we're doing. Yeah. And the pain can be intense, so the reaction is also intense. And of course, there's been heartache, all around for so many years because we're unable to forgive and forget and move on.
Yeah, it's an interesting phrase that, I hear that quite often, and it's normally said like this: I'll forgive, but I'll never forget.
Yes, yes, yes.
And it's that sort of, well, so in other words, you haven't actually forgiven at all. You're going to hold on to this for as long as you physically can.
Well, we'll talk about that later, because all our religious books tell us to forgive. So we might say, because I'm a Christian, I'm going to forgive. But deep down, that doesn't happen. So on the surface, it might happen, but underneath, it continues to cause trouble. So, okay, how does this anger affect us, this hurt and anger that we keep alive through our thinking?
It affects us in so many ways. When we're carrying the anger, when we're carrying that unforgiveness, that can affect our self-image, our self-worth, our self-confidence, our self-esteem.
Yes, and it directly shortens our lifespan. All the research is now showing that chronic anger, chronic stress is going to shorten your lifespan because, and they've shown, there's a small element at the end of our chromosomes called a telomere. And the length of that is directly correlated with our overall health and length of our lifespan. And people who are chronically stressed and angry, that length reduces. So it has a direct impact on our lifespan and our health and our vulnerability to cancer and all of that, because it impacts our immune system. So, yeah. But the other way this can affect us, I think, besides affecting our mental health, is it saps us from the joy of life.
Yeah.
Have you ever met someone who's angry and hurt, who has a joy of being alive?
The two things can't cohabit.
They just can't coexist, right?
Yeah.
It makes me suspicious of others, stops me getting close to others. And all this is happening unconsciously, right? Without my awareness.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that leads me to the next question, which is, why do you think I should forgive? Suppose someone's done something really mean to me. Why should I forgive them? Does it mean I'm letting them off the hook for having an affair and leaving me for another person, whatever it might be, another man?
I think this is some of the biggest misconception about forgiveness is that we believe that it's about, as you said, letting that other person off the hook, condoning what they've actually done in some way, shape or form, and saying, oh, it's okay, you left me when I needed you most, but that's okay, that's fine, don't worry about it. We hold on to that.
Yes. Or rather, our mind holds on to that.
Yes.
You see, we think we're holding on to it as if we're in control.
And whilst we blame the other person,
yes,
whilst we've got them to blame for our feelings, for our hurt, for whatever it is we're feeling, that hurt, that anger, that pain, whilst we've got them to blame, we're not looking within at all. We're not doing anything there. So why should we forgive? Because we've got to realize that it's not about the other person.
Yes.
It's
a gift we give ourselves, right?
It's a gift we give ourselves.
It doesn't mean you're letting someone off the hook or someone's not responsible for whatever they've done.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is really to bring peace to yourself. I mean, we talked about Nelson Mandela, and he's one example, but there's so many others of people who've gone out and forgiven others of amazing things that have, people who've killed others, the people close to them and so on, and forgiven their attackers or their rapists or whatever it might be. As a way of just healing themselves.
Because they made it, that they recognized that it wasn't about them. Nelson Mandela, when he came out of prison after 27 years, after being beaten, abused, whatever he experienced in that prison, which wasn't good, you know, a lot of people would have been perfectly understanding if he'd kind of mounted the black people into an army to kind of annihilate the white population that had done so much harm to him. But he didn't do that.
Yes.
He came out and he forgave them and made them part of.
Yes. So forgiveness really isn't a weakness. It's a sign of the highest intelligence.
Totally.
It's a sign of living with wisdom, because you're doing it because you realize it's going to heal you.
Yeah.
And it's going to probably contribute to peace in the world.
Yeah.
And we haven't mentioned that, but so much of the violence in the world is because this memory of pain is perpetuated not just individually, but also in communities and societies and countries.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. We just got to look across the water to Ireland, in Northern Ireland. You know, and we've done this before where we talk about, you know, Catholics on one side of the street hate the Protestants on the other side of the street. They don't even know each other.
Yes. I mean, the same can be said for the Indians and Pakistanis and the Russians and Ukrainians, or the Palestinians and, you know, Israelis and so on, all these conflicts around, or the Shias and Sunnis and all that. Okay. So the first step in all this,
yes,
is to have the intention to forgive.
Absolutely.
But that's not enough, is it, John? Just having the intention to forgive others is a first step, but it's not enough.
It's not enough. And quite often, it's the way I see forgiveness, it's a way of being. It's a way of learning to drop that pain, to drop that hatred, to drop that bitterness, and to make that, I mean, sometimes somebody's going to do something in your life which might upset you, which might, you know, make you feel that pain. And I think it's learning to catch that and to then decide that you're not going to allow that to now control your life.
Yes. Yes. So first thing to realize, I think, is our pain comes from our own reaction to what's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as you say, we can take ownership of that reaction.
Yes.
And realize our mind assumes others are responsible for our pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And we don't realize that our feelings, this is the other part of it, we don't realize that our feelings have been generated from within us.
Yes. Yes.
They haven't been, you know, somebody hasn't come along with a bucket of bitterness and thrown some bitterness on us or thrown some anger on us.
Yes.
That's been generated from within.
Inside. But again, it's the human mind that does that automatically. It's not you personally. That's what you have to realize. And just understanding the way the mind works and making the unconscious patterns conscious then gives you options and puts you in charge of your own life. I mean, that's the whole ethos behind the Human Wisdom Project. And we're going to show people around the app in a second. Okay, so for me, it's about realizing that we are the same human being deep down. And let me tell you a story. And for those who've heard this one before, apologies. But I was teaching in a school in Newcastle and giving a talk. And at the end, a teacher came to me and she was crying. And I started to apologize, saying, look, I'm sorry if I upset you. She said, no, what you've said has helped me to forgive my parents. Wow. So I said, what happened? And she said that she had a boyfriend who had a different skin color to her. And her parents refused to accept him. They married anyway, had children. Nobody had spoken for 20 years. And she said, there's this heartache everywhere. From the grandparents, in her heart, the grandchildren who haven't met their grandparents, and so on. But she said, today I realize from what you've said, that their actions came from their unconscious conditioning influences after the war.
Absolutely.
Which they're not aware of, right? We are not aware that our thoughts and actions come from our particular influences.
Yes.
And she said, what's helped me to forgive them is to realize that I am the same, that my thoughts and actions also come from my past influences, and I'm not aware of that either.
No, exactly.
See? So it's
That we're all
that
human.
understanding at that deeper level that
Yeah.
you and I are the same human being, the same processes that are occurring in you are occurring in me deep down.
Yes, exactly.
You know, when
Because
I don't know if Jesus was a historical figure, but I love this line that, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they know not what they do because they're not aware that firstly, they've been conditioned, and secondly, that all their actions come from that particular conditioning, right?
Yeah.
But I think the other thing to realize is that all of us operate from self-interest, from our fear, from the fact that the mind is comparing all the time, and it's the same in you and me. So when you realize someone else has acted from their self-interest, we get angry because we think we're different, but actually the more we travel inwards, we realize we're not. We're all the same human being. So this is one thing that really helps me to forgive and forget and realize, we're the same human being. They're not aware of their actions, you see?
That's a great leveler to recognize we're all ultimately the same.
Yeah, and most people are not aware of their actions or why they're doing what they're doing. They're just automatically doing that. Okay, so now forgiveness needs compassion.
Yes.
And to have this compassion, we need to probably dissolve our own hurt, don't we? How do we do that, John? Because it's, if I'm still burning and my heart is burning, my mind is burning with pain, then it's hard to forgive, right?
This kind of brings us back a little bit to what we talked about how it affects us psychologically and how it affects us, our self-esteem, our self-worth. Quite often, we don't even think that we ourselves are worthy of compassion, of forgiveness. So therefore, it is then very difficult. Well, actually, I say it's difficult. For most people that I meet, they're quite able to extend compassion to others and to be understanding of others. But when it comes to being understanding of themselves and being forgiving or compassionate with themselves, oh no, there's a different set of rules at play for them.
Yes. Let's talk
They're
about
not allowed to be.
How can we forgive ourselves? Okay. So maybe to realize that, hey, we're the same human being. We're fallible, that our mind is operating in these unconscious, automatic ways we're not aware of. And that's what's directing our thoughts and actions.
Yeah.
And if we have done something we regret, then what could we do? Suppose I've hurt someone, and someone has been hurt by my actions.
I think the first thing would be to look within, to be open to recognize that you have a part to play in this as well, and that you too, like any other human being, are victim to the same, to the word I'm looking for, to conditioning, to other influences that they're so beneath the consciousness and they've been bedded into you from childhood that you may not be aware of them.
Yes. So I think the first step is to recognize that you're human, fallible. Then to realize your mind operates automatically. And if you have hurt somebody, you can ask for forgiveness, as Anjali's just said. You can just say, I'm really sorry, and please forgive me for what happened. And how can I make amends? And say it genuinely as if you mean it. And I've done that.
It starts with that intention. It starts with that decision to do so, to do that.
Yes.
I do remember somebody in my life I had to forgive.
Yes.
And it was quite I held on to this for quite a while. And I remember I went to a conference at one point that we're talking about how to, this forgiveness process that we were learning at the time. And the person who was leading it, they said, right, I need you to bring to mind somebody who you need to forgive, and then work with a partner, and we will go through this process. So this person came to my mind that I needed to forgive. And I was horrified, because this person, I had no intention of ever forgiven. In fact, I was quite justified in my anger against this person.
Yes.
You know, they'd made my life really difficult over a number of years.
Right.
And I shared this with the person I was working with, and she quite wisely said to me, John, I think that's the person who you really need to be working with. You know, the person who I would least want to forgive, that was the person who I most needed to forgive.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for that. So I think it's about, and I think the power of asking for forgiveness should not be underestimated, right? Because it really touches the core of another person if you ask it with genuine sincerity and so on, you know.
Yeah.
But also maybe just ask yourself, hey, what can you learn? Right? What can I learn from what I did, and how can I be better, if you like, in the future?
What's the worst that could happen if I ask for forgiveness?
Yes, yes.
You know?
So I think forgiving ourselves is perhaps as important as forgiving others. But let's just end with this point about how do we dissolve our own hurt? If we have been rejected in the past, for example, as Jenny says, or we've been hurt, someone has done something, and we're carrying this hurt, how can we heal ourselves from that pain?
I think initially to sit with it, to not label it, you know, to just allow it to be as it is, not turn it into something that it isn't. You've been hurt. Okay, why am I hurt? What happened? What is it? Something? Is it an opinion of mine that's been challenged? Is it, you know, am I attached to something?
My ego that's been hurt, for example?
Is it my ego? Yeah.
Someone didn't make me feel important, you know?
Yeah.
Or
yeah. I've been challenged. How dare they?
Yes, yes. Or if someone leaves me, suppose I'm married and someone leaves me for another person, well, it's not a prison, is it? I mean, you know,
no, exactly.
There is
could become one.
People can leave. So we can take ownership of our own pain. That's the first step.
Yes. Yeah.
Sit with it, as you said. I mean, there is a whole new talk. If someone's interested in this particular subject, I've done a similar session with John D. Whitus. It's on our website and on the app called Overcoming Emotional Pain. We go into it in depth. But more importantly, to let go of our attachment.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to define us and our identity, right?
Yeah, because attachment affects us so much, doesn't it?
Yes, all of that.
We're attached to so many things.
So I'm going to take a minute and just show people around the Human Wisdom app, which has got all the subjects we're talking about in different modules. We'll only do this for a couple of minutes. It's free to download and browse, and then we're going to open it up for your questions and comments. So please think of what you're going to share with us. Okay. So this is the Human Wisdom app. It's on your desktop, but it's also on the iPhone and Android. This is the introduction, the beginning. Start here, and it's free, this part. And these videos explain how wisdom can help. Wisdom is nothing other than self-knowledge. That's all it is. So a deeper understanding of ourselves and how our minds work. And this can help us in all sorts of different ways. So I would begin with this section here. And this wisdom, how it brings transformation. There's a daily practice which sharpens our skills we need to grow in wisdom. So it's a breathing exercise, a question of the day. For example, how would your life change if you compared yourself to others only when you needed to and not automatically, and so on. So that's a set of daily exercises. Then we've curated the content in sections to help you explore a subject if you're of interest. So for example, if you're interested in, say, sorrow and loss, which is this topic perhaps, all the content we have is in one place here. So this one is a short video on dealing with loss, then more detailed modules to explore, emotional needs, looking without language, which is what we talked about, being with something, like any feeling. Some life stories, there's one here on forgiveness. Short videos, for example, how to deal with painful memories. Podcasts. The one I talked to you about, overcoming emotional pain using wisdom, is here, or overcoming grief, and various events. So all that is in one place. So depending on your particular interest, you can explore a subject of interest, or wherever our thinking is involved, wisdom has a role to play. So it can help us with stress and happiness. So these are all the different subjects that are covered, and I'll leave you to browse this for yourself. But to give you a flavor of what each subject looks like, if you open a module on communication, for example, you'll find a number of different sessions, and it goes into it in quite some depth. Then you can explore your emotions and how to manage them. For example, the other day, a man told me that for the first time in his life, he realized his wife was not responsible for his anger. His anger came from himself, from his own unmet expectations, which came from his particular conditioning. Then we have sections on developing a calm mind, understanding how your mind works. And this section on conditioning, which is our past influences, is very powerful. And then one on understanding yourself and how to help make the world a better place. So I'll leave you to browse that at your leisure. Okay, so now this is the best bit I like, which is to open it up to everyone's comments and questions. And maybe I'll start with the comments we had. So Vinita, do you want to share your thoughts on forgiveness has a direct correlation with expectation? Forgetting plays an important role. Go ahead.
Thanks, Manoj. First of all, thanks for sharing that wisdom about forgiveness. And by I said I correlating it because so many times it has come out in the form of unmet expectations, and difficulty is about forgetting it. You rightly mentioned that it's all about the memories we have. And the painful part is that each memory have an emotional charge. If you can work on it, if you can release that emotion from that memory, it becomes a bit easier for us to forget. And the moment the forgetting process starts, forgiveness takes place in that moment.
Yes.
This is what I experienced with my own self also, and with my clients also.
Yes.
And it requires practice when how to get your memories emotional charge free.
Okay. And I think you raise a really important point that once you've forgotten a hurt, then you don't even need to forgive anymore because the memory of that hurt is gone, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Manoj. Thanks, John. I mean, this is such an important subject in the world today, this. What comes to mind for me is what role judgment plays in all of this. Because just speaking personally, being brought up a Catholic, a cradle Catholic, and then being 25 years in Catholic education.
I feel your pain.
Obviously there's an awful lot of conditioning there, which was brought me up to believe what was good, bad, right, or wrong. And now I'm going through a divorce. Now you can imagine that, given that upbringing that I had, the judgment that I have of myself is probably worse than the judgment that anybody else gives me, that I'm therefore wrong for getting a divorce. and it's a bad thing, which means that I'm wrong and therefore I'm bad. And because I look at that, then obviously part of that is about self-judgment and having to forgive myself. Going to a deeper wisdom, and I've done a lot of work on this, you know, and thanks to Manoj for that. A deeper wisdom says that actually I'm okay. I'm worthy. I'm loved. We all are. And we all are the same human being. And when I realized that actually going through a divorce, a messy divorce, is, and the hurt that I feel inside of myself is coming from that upbringing, that conditioning, the judgment that's been around me my whole life, makes the forgiveness a lot easier. Now, a step further than that is that it is a messy divorce, and there's a lot of conflict between us. But one of the greatest things for me is to understand that the way I've been brought up has led me to think what's good, bad, right, or wrong. The way she has been brought up has led her to think what's good, bad, right, or wrong. As far as she's concerned, her actions are perfectly reasonable. And if I'd been brought up in exactly the same way, with that idea of what's good, bad, right, or wrong, then I would be acting in exactly the same way that she is.
Yes.
So to have that understanding that that's where she's coming from, it makes that compassion and that forgiveness so much easier, because as far as she's concerned, she's doing nothing wrong.
Yes.
And as far as I'm concerned, I'm doing nothing wrong. And to remove the good, bad, right, or wrong and just accept that that's the way it is, I'm just observing the way it is,
Yes,
allows the space within and the wisdom within to come up, and the compassion and the forgiveness and the love to come through.
Dominic, that's really beautifully expressed. Thank you for that. Anjali. You're on mute, Anjali.
Hello, I'm just tempted to share a little something that has worked for me very beautifully, and I just thought, let me just share it. Just to give a little background, that as a young girl, I was very obstinate and full of myself. And I gave a lot of importance to myself, and I had a huge self-esteem, as if I'm God's gift to humanity. So that is how I lived. So then it was a life-changing event for me that I was thrown out of my marital home with 2 small children, and I had to fend for myself. So for some time, for a few years, I kept on blaming everyone around me that, you know, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. Then one day, and I had no introduction to my coaching program or anything of that sort. I was too busy making 2 ends meet. But one day it so happened that I was telling myself that when I have so much of importance for myself, and I think that I am very independent and I can do everything myself, then why is it that I am holding somebody else so powerful that they can control my happiness and my misery?
Right.
That means I'm giving the remote control of my life to somebody else, which means that I am empowering them. And that was the day my life changed forever. And I just started telling myself that, no, I'm not going to make these people so powerful that they can make me miserable.
Yes.
And from that day onwards till today, I think I've never looked back. And so much so that over the years, the resentment, the anger turned into empathy for them.
Yes.
And lately I've started feeling that what they did to me was the best thing that they ever did. Because if they did not do that to me, if they did not throw me out of the house and left me to fend for myself, I would not have been where I am today. So I have today all my gratitude for them.
Yeah, it was in response to John said, you know, what's the worst that can happen? And that's when I put in rejection, and then realized I don't type fast enough. But something I wanted to say was that, and David mentioned, you know, the inner child and that, and I work as an EFT practitioner and go back to these things where people are holding on to this anger and bitterness and resentment and all the rest of it towards someone, and they're running like an unconscious program where they believe to make sense of it as a child, they believe they've been rejected, or they believe they've been abandoned, or they believe they're not loved. And so when these things happen over time and you know, decades later, they're still happening, it's just validation that their belief is correct.
Yes.
And that becomes very, very difficult to just let go of.
Yes.
In the way that we're talking about now.
Yes.
You know, through EFT, we go back and unpack it, and it's easy for people to see it. But there is that difficulty when someone's anger towards them is perceived as rejection or abandonment, and then it's just validating that child part's belief of whatever they've got.
Yes. So every time I talk about my story and me, I repeat that story of my pain, my rejection. And every time I feel hurt, I repeat the story of why I'm feeling hurt, which is caused by whatever event it was. So my mind has repeated this thousands and thousands of times. And then someone like me or you come along and say, no, you've got to let that go. And you say, no, that's my best friend. How can I let that go?
Yeah.
You know, because
that's become part of you.
It's part of me. I can't, it's like letting go of my right arm. How can I let that go? I guess that's the journey. We have to realize what our mind has done to us. The whole Human Wisdom project is based on this premise, that to understand, to shine a light into what our mind is doing to us. And as soon as we see that clearly, that's what is the beginning, I think, of wisdom and freedom. So wonderful. Thank you. I'd just like to bring Suzanne Odes in. Suzanne works with children. Suzanne, do you want to come in and share something?
Hello, that was lovely. Thank you. Needs to come back into the room. Yeah, I think I put something in the chat about the restorative practice that we do at my school. It's just so needed because the children increasingly, I think, are finding it difficult to exist in the world that we live in and be able to it's accepting that responsibility for our own reactions, our own actions, but being able to see things from the other person's point of view. And it's so important that we give them that time and that space to do that. Which it's really difficult in the school day, obviously, but we do have to spend a lot of time doing that, because if they don't learn to see things from the other person's point of view and have that empathy for other people, then, you know, as adults, they're not going to be able to exist in the world. Just empathy, and the one thing that's really come up for me as I've been listening to everybody is just being able to have empathy for other people and to love other people, and to have empathy for ourselves, and that compassion and that love for ourselves. It's got to flow both ways, hasn't it?
Yes. Well, thanks, Suzanne, because I do a lot of work with children, and they somehow are more unkind to each other than adults are, because we have some barriers or guards or whatever, some idea that we might get something, you know, but children have no such barriers. So they're really unkind. But if you talk to them, and it's something we need to learn as adults too, that when other people are behaving badly, it's because usually they are hurting. And there's so much hurt in the world for various reasons. And we don't take ownership of it. We think it's come from the outside. But we are reacting to that hurt. So the children tell me they know that when someone is bullying others, it's because they're hurting inside. I've got this beautiful dialogue on our website with this 8-year-old girl. And she said, I understand they're hurting. And if I don't do something, they're going to keep hurting other people. So I'm going to go up and say, can I be your friend? So that's what we need to do, perhaps, is to not only heal our own hurts, but see if we can heal the hurts of others, because otherwise they're just going to keep on hurting other people as we go. Okay, is there anyone else who would like? Mike, you had a thought about faith says forgiveness and so on. That's a very interesting one about guilt. Go ahead.
I thought you were letting me off the hook there,
No.
I think some things that other people have said have caused me to reflect. I think, Dominic, you talking about your upbringing and background has a lot to do with the circumstance I was going to tell you about in some detail, but having listened to what Manoj said about replaying the story, I'm not sure I really want to say too much about the specifics, but I was, until quite recently, an elder in a small Christian church and have been for some time. And a lot went wrong. And in the end, I did the only thing I could do, which was to walk away from it. I walked away from the church. My wife was in the same boat and she did the same thing. So at least we were doing that together. But it left me in a situation where my faith said I should be forgiving those responsible. I do have a strong Christian faith. I have really struggled to forgive, although I've just tried again. And I think something worked just then. So thank you, Georgie, for that. But when I fail to forgive because of my faith, I can then feel very guilty about that.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's what I believe I should be doing. And I really do believe I should be doing it. I know we mustn't use words like should and must.
Yes.
But it's part of what I believe in. And that's quite a difficult vicious circle to break out of.
Yes. I think sorry, go ahead, Mike. Please go ahead.
I was just going to say, although what we've just done has pointed me to some things I can do practically that might well help me with that.
Yes. I think to realize that it's our unconscious conditioning, in your case, the church, which has created the ideal that you should forgive. Whereas what wisdom does is helps you understand what gets in the way of forgiving others. And that's your hurt. So how can you heal your hurt and take ownership of your hurt? And as Anjali said, you're giving someone else a remote control. And whatever, we've discussed so many different strategies. But as we keep exploring, that's when it becomes so much easier. And the guilt goes away and you realize you're the same human being as everyone else.
I mean, what you've said seems obvious now.
Yes.
But these things aren't obvious until somebody speaks them or I speak them myself.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mike. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I've certainly really enjoyed the session. And please download and have a look at the Human Wisdom app. It's free to download and browse. Share your comments with us later. And I'll send you a recording of this event. And have a good weekend. Thank you.